By the end of this video, you're going to know how to write a complete hybrid training plan where you're going to get stronger at your squat, bench and deadlift, and also run your 5K faster. We're going to dive into the details of lifting 3 times a week and running 2 times a week. And then we're going to work out how to structure your week so you get the most out of your hybrid training. Towards the end of the video, I discussed the key thing that if you don't do this, all of this video is essentially pointless. So don't forget to stick around for that. And by also sticking around to the end, you get access to a cheeky bonus download where you can put all of this stuff into practice and get you on your way. So let's get into it. Welcome to my YouTube channel where I help everyday athletes get bigger, stronger and faster in less time and help you get more out of your efforts. As mentioned, today we're going to take a deep dive into programming and how we can get the most out of our week when we're trying to do lifting and running at the same time. So let's head over to the whiteboard and dive in. So first things first is, who is this video for? I believe this video is perfect for the beginner, the intermediate and the advanced hybrid athlete, because everyone will be able to take something from this video and implement it into their training. Whether you're a beginner athlete just starting out your hybrid journey and you're looking for some guidance and you want to get stronger in your squat, bench and deadlift while also maybe getting faster at your 5K run. And then if you're an advanced hybrid athlete and you've been doing this for a little while now, you'll be able to hopefully take out some of those principles that we discussed throughout the video, just like the intermediates can, but maybe be then inspired to look at your current training and look at maybe where you might want to maybe make a change. And of course, this will guide you to get stronger and faster. But most importantly, this video is perfect for anyone who's limited on time, but wants to get into hybrid training and they want to get the most bang for their buck. So let's understand the specific goal that we're going to be working towards in this specific video. So now that we understand who this video is for, we're going to break down what is the goal that we're going to be working towards and how are we going to achieve it. Now, what is the goal? We're going to look to get you stronger in your squat, bench and deadlift, while also looking to get you faster at your 5K. And all of this is ideally done in sessions that are 60 minutes or less. Now the how is we're going to break our week down into 3 lifting sessions and 2 runs per week. Those 3 lifting sessions can follow any format. You could have a lower upper full body split, you could have a push pull legs, or you might want to do a full body split where you train everything each day. Now this video is going to specifically focus on the lower upper full body split because I've personally found with myself and my clients that it gives us enough time to recover in between sessions and we can leave ourselves feeling stronger and ready for the next session rather than always kind of feeling beaten up. Because when you are balancing lifting and running, you do need to take into considerations the effects of the fatigue from our strength sessions and how it's going to carry over into our running sessions. When it comes to our runs, we're going to focus today's video on having 2 runs a week, which is going to be our interval run and our long run. Now, if you're like an intermediate or advanced athlete already running quite a bit in the week, you could add in a 3rd session, which would be a nice steady run. But for this particular video, we're going to focus on the 2 runs of the interval and the long run. So let's get into the lifting portion from the complete guide to hybrid training. Now, a couple of points just to take consideration of is this program is going to be based on the fact that you're already doing a form of running and lifting, and that you've set yourself some benchmarks. So you've done a test week, so you know what your squat, bench and deadlift numbers are, and you also know what your 5K time trial is. Now, as part of my lift and run program that's for sale on my website, I use a set benchmark week at the start of the program so that we know what we're working towards and looking to surpass over a 13-week period. But to simplify this video, to make it a little bit more accessible, we're going to be following the Wendler strength progression because it's quite nice and easy to follow, and it's also relatively low volume, so the stressors aren't too high. Now, with the Wendler, if you've never done it before, it's all based off of 90% of your 1 rep max. So if you've got a 1 RM bench press of 100 kilos, everything is going to be programmed off of 90 kilos. So that's your training max. And you essentially build up to week 1 is a 5 or more set at 85%. In the second week, it's a 3 or more set at 90%. And then in the third week, it's a 1 or more at 95% of your training max. So now that's out of the way, let's get into the actual specifics that we're going to focus on in this lower, upper and full body split. So let's start out with the lower body session. With this, our warm up generally is something that's session specific, and we're going to include things like weak point or prehab training within this. So that'll probably include things like some plyos or some extra stability work. Based on where you are right now and your limitations, that's what I would look to put in within your warm up. So making sure you've done a form of, say, some type of squats, some type of lunges, and probably some deep tier plyo work to make sure that we're primed, ready to get into our strength piece from today. So then into the strength piece, we've got our back squat, since we're looking to get stronger at our squat, bench and deadlift. Now with the back squat, as I mentioned earlier, following that 5-3-1 progression, week 1 is the 5s, weeks 2 is the 3s and then 1s. Now we're going to be pairing this with some tib raises. Now we're going to do this because tib raises are going to help strengthen our shin essentially, which when it comes to running is something we want to make sure we're strengthening so that we don't get things like shin splints. Now by adding these as part of a superset with this strength piece, this isn't going to take too much stress away from the back squat, so it's going to be an easy superset to just get more done in less time, and that's what we're looking for here: time efficient training. Now once we've gone through our strength piece, we're then going to go into our first superset. So superset 1. Now you're going to choose a form of hinge and a form of lunge. Now I've chosen around a 6 to 10 rep range. Those on the low end, so we're looking to a little bit of strength but also a little bit of size as well in that range. Now with a hinge, you can use exercises like, say, a barbell Romanian deadlift, some dumbbell Romanian deadlifts. You could do a good morning, you could utilize, say, kettlebells and do some kettlebell swings. Just depends on where you are and what you'd like to do, really. And with our lunges, anything that's locomotive, so anything that's moving, whether that's stepping forwards or stepping backwards, I really recommend introducing some lunges into your programming here. Now, if you don't do some lunges, you could say do some step ups or something where you're a bit more static in the movement and focusing on going up and down rather than forwards or backwards. Then into our second superset, we've got some glutes, calves and abs. Now with the glutes, you could do things like, say, hip thrusts, you could do some glute bridges, some single leg glute bridges, anything that where you can really start to target the glutes and that you feel the most there. Now calves, because again, when it comes to running, we want to make sure we've got nice strong calves, and I would look to work through a nice slow and controlled range of motion, because running is the opposite of that. So we're already going to be exposing ourselves to quite fast plyometric movements in our warm-up and in running, so we want to slow it down a bit and really get some good strength in there so that we got a good bit of diversity in that muscle. So we're challenging both our type 1 and our type 2 strength fibers. Now with our abs, we're going to focus on a flexion and extension bias exercise. So that's pretty much things like crunches, GHD sit-ups, hanging leg raises, anywhere where basically your spine moves from open to closed like that. Now, as an optional extra, this is part of my lift and run program, I have arms as an optional extra at the end of your leg day. If you've got the time and you fancy a little pump, then just pick a bicep and tricep exercise and aim for around 8 to 12 reps. Now let's move into our upper body hybrid strength session. So we're going to start very similar here. So we're going to have some session specific exercises to get us primed and prepped, ready for our bench press. And then we're going to try and include some weak point and prehab style exercises to again make sure we're getting that bang for our buck and getting the most done in a short amount of time. So our strength piece today is the bench press, following that same method of 5-3-1. So in week 1, 5s, week 2 is 3s, week 1 is 1s. Now, we're going to pair that with carries. So that could be anything. You could be thinking about doing some farmer's carries where you're holding them just by your side, say holding some dumbbells or some kettlebells. You could have some weights in your front rack position here, so like 2 kettlebells. You could go overhead, but you can choose a form of carry. Again, putting exercises together that aren't going to necessarily take too much away from the main strength piece. Now, moving into the next part. So with the upper body, I've really gone into a preference of utilizing some body weight movements next, going close to failure as a way of just utilizing your body and really feeling quite strong, but also using it as an opportunity to take your joints through large ranges of motion. So I've chosen here chins and dips because it gives us an opportunity to get our hands into a supinated position, so we get in a nice little stretch in our shoulders and our pecs and our lats. And then we're also going into some dips where we're getting a nice big stretch into our shoulder as well when we get into our end range. So what I've done here for a little bit of progression, we can go say 2 from failure, 1 to 2 from failure, 1 from failure, and then on our 4th week we can say go to failure on these exercises. So obviously depending where you are with chins and dips, those reps can vary. You might not even be able to do a chin up, so you could utilize things like say banded chin ups or even negative chins. So moving into our second superset, we have a horizontal single arm pull and an overhead tricep exercise. Now with a horizontal single arm pull, that could be things like a single arm row. You could utilize cables, you could do a body weight row. So there's quite a few options, but the goal here is to have a single arm movement where you allow the body to kind of move a little bit freely rather than being too rigid. So with a single arm row, you might be thinking allowing the body to get a nice stretch on the way down, and then as you pull, you open up a little bit more as well. Now, our overhead tricep position, there are so many overhead tricep positions. You can use cables, dumbbells, you can use a barbell, an easy bar. There's so many things that you can do. So choose one that feels comfortable for you to do. And then lastly, our third superset here is you're going to pick a bicep exercise, ideally not the same one you've done on day 1, unless you didn't do that there. I would like to utilize something like a barbell curl here or an easy bar curl. And then our abs is going to be a rotation bias exercise. So things like wood chops, side plank rotations, we're going to have Russian twists, anything where our torso moves side to side. Now, lastly, we're going to get ourselves into our full body session. Now, this is probably my favorite session of the week because we get an opportunity to deadlift and we get another opportunity to do arms. So with our full body session, we have the same principles here with that session specific warm up and the weak point prehab training. And then we're going to get into 2 strength pieces. So we have our deadlift where we follow that 5-3-1, and we're also going to do a strict press where we're following that 5-3-1 method over the 3 weeks. Then we're going to take ourselves into the first superset where it's going to be a horizontal push and a lateral lower body exercise. Now there's the range of reps I've chosen around here should be around that 8 to 15, so nice big range. So you can either choose to get a bit more of a high volume pump or stick on that lower end and kind of work to those heavier weights for that sets at 8. So for here, for a horizontal push, you might want to do some say incline dumbbell presses, and with your lateral lower body, you might want to do something like some Cossack squats or some lateral lunges, something where we're moving side to side rather than always just going up and down. So our second superset is a horizontal row and an iso bias abs exercise. So with our horizontal row, generally I tend to lean a bit more towards the supported exercises, so like a chest supported row, mainly because we've got a lot of stress going through our lower backs from the deadlift and the strict press. We've had quite a big week here, so give ourselves a little bit of a break but still get a good contraction in our backs. So I tend to go for that supported variation. And then with our abs, so the iso bias, so we're going to think about something like a plank or maybe like a side plank, something like that, because we've done some flexion and extension at the start of the week. We've done some rotation. We've also done some carries where, again, it's a bit like an isometric core exercise, so it's static, but we're also moving. And then here, just to finish off the week, to make sure we're hitting our abs in the many different ways, we're going to throw in a form of isometric hold. And then, of course, to finish off, get a solid sweep pump in the arms. So you can choose anything that you haven't done in the week so far. And again, you choose the rep range. I actually like to utilize blood flow restriction training here because it's a bit lighter weight. You get an absolutely massive pump, but we'll discuss that in future videos. So let's now move into running. So this is the part where we're going to be thinking about getting faster at our 5K. So a couple of things to go through before we get into the main crux of the content. So we're going to be focusing on 2 runs a week. So we're going to think of 1 interval session and 1 long session. Now, if you're a beginner or intermediate, this is really great. If you're intermediate or advanced, you might want to think about adding in a 3rd session, so thinking more about like a zone 2 style run. Now, one other thing we want to clarify is where you see RP, that stands for race pace, and what I like to do is give myself a range to try and hit. So on a good day, I'm probably going to be just slightly faster than my race pace, and on a day where I'm feeling a little less recovered or a little more beaten up, I might be closer to the just over race pace. So as an example, if my 5K was 25 minutes, that's going to be a 5 minutes per kilometer pace. Now that means my race pace will be between 4:55 to 5 minutes 10. So that means per kilometer, that's the kind of pace that I'll be looking to hit. So as I said, on a good day, I want to be pushing closer towards that 4:55. On a not so good day, I can lean a little bit more towards the 5:10, but I'll be still getting the work done. So what I've done is giving you 4 weeks of programming so that you can kind of see how it goes and then how it recycles back in. So let's just start out with the interval based session. So using a real simple structure of like 60 seconds on, 60 seconds off, and doing that for 5 rounds. Week 2, we could then progress this to 75 seconds on and 75 seconds off. So you're getting a little bit more rest, but you're working for that little bit more time. And then in week 3, the deload week, we're then bringing it back down to 60 seconds and keeping that rest up, but we're adding in an extra round. So overall, our volume is ever so slightly up. And then on week 4, we'll be going back to that 60 seconds on and 60 seconds off, but now we're increasing it to 8 rounds. Now these interval sessions over the 4 weeks equal 25 minutes, 27.5 minutes, 29.5 minutes, and 31 minutes total. So that's going to be taken into consideration a 10-minute warm-up where you're going to include some strides. So that's going to be thinking about increasing intensity and then taper it off, increasing intensity and taper it off, and getting ourselves ready for this race pace. And then our cool down will be anywhere between 5 to 10 minutes at an easy effort pace. So where you're like cruising in to get yourself home. So you can clearly see this, that 25 minutes is built up of 10 minutes of work, 10 minutes easy, and then 5 minutes at an easy pace. So that's giving us our 25 minutes. So let's move into the long run now. So we've got in week 1, 20 minutes. We're going to be looking to run this at a conversational pace. So this will be, we'll save our intensity, our high intensity work for the first session of the week. And that second session, we're thinking more about just time on feet. So week 1, 20 minutes, week 2, 22 minutes, week 3, 20 minutes. So we're deloading down. And then week 4, we're increasing by 10% from week 2. So up to 24 minutes. So when we're thinking about how to progress our weekly mileage, we want to think of it like that. We want to be thinking, overall, over the whole week, how much have I increased? So if I've done a total of 25 minutes in my interval session and 20 minutes on my long run session, that's giving me 45 minutes. So I've now got 4.5 minutes I can look to increase into week 2. So in week 2, I've put a little bit of time into my long run and I've put a little bit more extra time into my interval run. Now, because this is based on a short 12-week cycle, the first deload isn't really a deload per se. It's more about kind of staying where you're at so you can assess and see how is my body feeling, how is my body reacting to the stresses that I'm putting it under, and if it's feeling good, then you know you can keep increasing, say, by 10%. So here we've stayed at 0%, so we've stayed at 49.5 minutes, but what we've done, we've dropped down our long run, but we've increased our short interval based run by those 2 minutes. Now, we're then in week 4 increasing it to 55 minutes. So that's adding 10% onto our week 2 total volume. So that's now adding 2 minutes onto our long run from week 2, and then we're adding 3.5 minutes on to our interval based session. So what we can start to do is to think when it comes to our cool down, we can then manipulate that to ensure we're getting the right amount of total time on feet, rather than just thinking, right, always have to stick to a 10-minute cool down, or I always have to stick to a 5-minute cool down. Generally, I would try to keep the warm up the same, because again, it's priming the body, it's getting you in the right headspace for what you're about to do. But by giving yourself some consistency here means when you get to your work, you know how prepared you're going to be feeling. And then your cool down, you can adjust based on how you're feeling, based on the intervals that you've done that day. So just a couple of notes to take point of. As I've been mentioning about that time on feet, we want to be thinking about increasing it no more than 10% each week. And that every 3 to 4 weeks, you're probably going to have a little drop off in total volume by about 20 to 30%. Now, it does depend on how long your cycle, depends on how many deloads and stuff you're going to have. But based on my lift and run program, I have a little assessment week at week 3. So as you see here, where we kind of stay at the same total running volume, but we get to then assess how the body's feeling. Week 7, we have an actual deload where we drop our total loading by 30%. And then in week 11, we have a little taper week, getting ready for our 5-kilometer time trial at the end of week 12. Now, when it does come towards the deload, that's completely preferential what you want to do. You can choose to take, say, the 30% deload volume from just your long run. You can take it from your interval run, or what I like to do is drop about 20% of the deload from my interval run and then take just 10% off of my long run, because the stress on the body is going to be mainly from the interval sessions, and the long run is just time on feet at a relatively low intensity, so I don't want to take too much away. So that's just my personal preference and how I like to program for my clients as well. So now let's get into how do we structure all of this into a week based on your schedule. So here are 2 options for a potential weekly schedule. Number 1 would be based on if you're running 2 times a week, so if you're that beginner intermediate athlete. And option 2 is if you're deciding to run 3 times a week, where you're that more intermediate / advanced based athlete. So option 1 with our 2 times a week, we've got a lower body on day 1, so Monday. Tuesday, upper body. Wednesday is our interval session. Then we have a rest day. Then we have a full body, long run, and then rest day on the Sunday. Now, the reason I've decided to schedule it like this is because we get a little bit of recovery time in between our lower body and then our intense run session. And we also get enough time between run session 1 and run session 2. So it means that we should be able to perform fully and at our best at each of those run sessions, and they shouldn't then affect our strength sessions either. So if we're following the program that we've designed so far, and we're thinking about the full body into the long run day as an example, we're going to be carrying over some fatigue from the deadlifts from our full body session into that long run. But because the long run is an easy effort, that extra fatigue that we're carrying isn't too bad, and it shouldn't affect us too much. But part of being a hybrid athlete is carrying over fatigue into sessions, and we're not expected to be the freshest and necessary performance needed. But what we do want to think is, if we're going into these long runs carrying over fatigue, just think about how good our performance will be when we're not carrying over that fatigue and we're going into our time trial. So let's move into option 2, where it's running 3 times a week. Now we're looking at combining the stresses in day 1. So on Monday, we've got our lower body strength session, and then we've also got our interval run. So that means we can get all of our stress done at the start of the week, and we're basically looking to recover from all the days after that. We then go into our upper body day, and that follows with an alternate day. So we have either Wednesday or Thursday. We can switch around based on our diaries. So we can either take the Wednesday as a rest day and then follow that up with a steady run. That could be at an easy effort or a tempo based run that is goal dependent on whatever you're choosing to work towards. Or you might want to move the steady run to the Wednesday and then have a nice 3 days of solid work and then 1 day off. And then we follow that up with that full body session and the same long run, and then we get that rest day on the Sunday, so that by the time we come back around to here, we've had a rest day in between our long run, getting ourselves ready then for our lower body and our interval day. So these are just two hypothetical options on how you could schedule your week so that you can kind of manage fatigue the best way you can, being a hybrid athlete. But at the end of the day, it does come down to your schedule and where you can fit stuff in. So make sure you plan it in your diary and think, right, where realistically can I get these sessions in? If you're a beginner and intermediate, running 2 times a week is probably a good place to start. And then maybe once you've gone through a full 12-week cycle, you can then look to maybe increase and add on that 3rd week. So to complete the guide to hybrid training, we now know how to train. The next step is to understand how to fuel these workouts. Click the link here where we break down how to fuel hybrid training. Because without the right fueling strategy, we won't be able to recover properly in between sessions. So we want to make sure we're fueling and recovering the best we can in between the sessions. So let's get into the summary from today's video. Minimum effective dose. This is a massive thing that I like to always think about when it comes to programming for this style of training. We want to make sure we're getting the minimum effective dose of each area of our training to make sure that we're moving the needle forward. So we're doing just enough to stimulate the muscles when it comes to strength training and for size, and we're doing just enough to stimulate our speed increases out on the pavement, and we're doing enough to move the needle. But we're not doing too much where we're then struggling to recover, say, from our strength sessions, so then our running goes to absolute pop, or vice versa. We're pushing so hard in our running sessions that then when it comes to our strength training, we just still feel under recovered. So recovery really is the game when it comes to hybrid training. So on that, we also need to think about managing our expectations. So we need to understand that carrying over fatigue is normal, and training like a hybrid athlete means we're going to have fatigue in our endurance-based sessions. But what we're trying to be here is good at most things. We want to be able to be strong. We want to be able to be fit. We're not necessarily trying to be the fastest or the strongest. We're trying to be above average on both. And with this, we also need to take in mind of playing the long game. So we want to think about to not increase more than 10% every week on our running volume. And that stays the same with our training as well, with our lifting. We want to make sure we're not jumping too far ahead where we're then not able to recover. So that key theme of that recovery that we keep talking about. We're going to have to think about, make sure we utilize those deload weeks. So we're using it to assess how the body feels. We're not just doing less. We're thinking, right, I've run a little bit less this week. How do I feel? Am I itching to do more next week? Or am I dreading to go back to that higher volume? If you're dreading to go back to the higher volume, might be meaning you're doing a bit too much. If you're looking forward to getting back to those sessions, it means you're probably at that right point and you're ready to do more. And then lastly, as a thank you for watching this video, I put together 2 weeks free of my lift and run program. Now, what this includes is the benchmark week where we test your squat, bench and deadlift, and also test your 5 or 10K based on where you're at. And then I also include week 1 of the lift and run program. And what this will mean, you can see how I've laid it out. I've followed these principles, and you can see what exercises I've selected and how I've selected and why I've selected them. So if you're interested in grabbing your free 2-week program, click the link in the description below. It will take you through. No obligation there. Just put in your email. You'll get everything delivered directly straight to your phone. Now, lastly, if you're looking to get a done for you program, you can download the Strength Formula Lift and Run program, which is a 13-week program covering everything that we've discussed today. And if you want to save yourself 20%, use the code YTSAVING at checkout and you get 20% off. So thanks a lot for watching. I'll see you in the next video.